Welcome back. So the South African Cemeteries Association has emphasized the need for the sustainable management of burial sites. It comes as part of the country battle with a shortage of burial space. Cities are facing significant shortages of burial land, leading to closure of some cemeteries. Johannesburg head of cemeteries and crematoria, Azola Manjati, joins us for more on the situation here in Johannesburg. Mr. Manjati, a good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll get into some of these suggestions that are being put forward by the Joburg mayor, but I'm keen to get just your view of how you characterize, just broadly, access to burial space in a city as busy and populated as Johannesburg.
Good evening. Thanks to you and the viewers. Yes, the burial space is the issue for the entire country. It's not only something that is happening in Johannesburg, but City of Johannesburg has available space for the next 30 to 40 years through the active cemeteries that we have. Currently, we have 5 active cemeteries and 38 passive cemeteries, which makes a total of 42 cemeteries. The passive cemeteries is the cemeteries that there are no new interments that are being conducted, only the secondary burials and third burials through reduction and reopenings. And then we also, as City of Johannesburg, have 2 crematorias, which also are not running into full capacity due to low uptake in cremations. We are seeing increase in cremations, but not at the speed that we wish it would happen. So we are out there marketing the cremations, but we're not forcing anyone to take cremations.
Yeah.
And we're just encouraging them to, that is another alternative burial method.
So I do want to sit and talk about cremations, because that's an interesting sort of development when you say there is a slow uptake, if you consider just the cultural context of South Africa. But let's just go back to the cemeteries that you have talked about. You said we've got the 42. In the meantime, though, you've got the mayor of Johannesburg, Dada Morero, who was at the South African Cemeteries and Crematoria Association's national conference. And in there he talked about a need to really appeal to residents to look at different ways of burials, whether it be multiple burials in family graves, mausoleums, as well as green burials. And you need to perhaps help us understand what a green burial actually is, because that is quite a bit of jargon there. But he makes the point that land will not solve our problem where space is concerned. So when you say we've got 30 to 40 years of burial space available, is that considered sufficient? Or is that, in your terms and in your world, something that is simply just not enough?
I would say for the near future, it's considered sufficient. However, in the long term or even medium term, is not sufficient. Once you get to year 10 to year 15 of that burial space, that's when you see traffic congestions, the smaller space and clustered setups in the cemeteries, which is not a really dignified way of families to bury. So within the next 3 to 8 years, we need to do something about burial space so we relieve pressures in our cemeteries. Currently, Olifantsfontein is taking about 110 funerals on a Saturday alone. So that tells you how much congestion is there. And Olifantsfontein is one of the biggest cemeteries in the Southern Africa. But still, there is a pressure that needs to be elevated at Olifantsfontein. So yes, Mayor did mention alternative burials, which include reopenings and mausoleums and cremations, which are more sustainable than looking on than new burials.
What happens when you try and have a campaign to encourage South Africans to consider cremations? You know, I can just imagine the sort of responses that you get from South Africans, that perhaps all of them very steeped in their cultural beliefs, and some of the hindrances there where that is concerned.
Yes, every year, Johannesburg City Parks and Zoo runs a campaign educating people on alternative burials. And through those awarenesses, we are seeing that they're bearing fruit, that there is a little bit of increase in cremations year on year, albeit on small percentages, but the increase is there. And now we are seeing that across denominations, people start to accept cremations as a viable alternative burial method. It's starting to be accepted now, even with reopens. It started very slowly, but it had picked up over the years. Right now, Avalon is competing with the active cemeteries, while, while it's only offering the reburials. So the reburials now have taken hold, have rooted into our society, are a normal thing. And then also cremations at the moment are coming very on a steady, slow pace behind. So we're hoping in the next 3 to 5 years, cremation would have hold already.
So then the mayor makes some interesting utterances where at this conference, he also talks about shifting cultural mindsets and integrating digitization and tourism in the space of cemeteries. Now, I wonder what you make of, and how you interpret what the mayor is talking about there, saying that some of our burial spaces could be used, for instance, for solar energy plants and involve community leaders, but investing in digitization of our cemeteries, what would that look like?
The digitization of cemeteries as a smart city, we're looking at bookings online, tracing graves online, that if you are sitting in your couch, then look for the grave of your loved one in our cemeteries, and it must actually take you through GPS to the grave, to the exact location of the grave or to the vicinity of the grave. So that is the project of cemetery digitization that we have embarked on in the last financial year. So we are continuing with that project. We will communicate when the project has been completed. We will launch the project and then educate the public about the project.
And then he talks about having our cemeteries used as solar farms. Is that something that you would agree with, especially when you consider the sensitivities of certain families? And he does make the point that he doesn't believe that these solar farms in cemeteries would so much as disturb the graveyard, the graves. But I wonder what you make of that suggestion of innovation by the mayor.
Yes, currently there is that innovation that is being looked at. JCPZ is in consultation with City Power to see the viability of the options that can be exercised. And it must be remembered, not all our cemeteries have graves. For example, the model would be first tested at Panorama, which is a cemetery with a very high water table. So there are no graves at the moment. So if the pilot project is successful at Panorama Cemetery, then it can be phased to other cemeteries. Of course, there will be public participation in terms of the project itself, but currently it's still talks between officials consulting to see the viability.
Yeah, I'm going to put you to the test a little bit just as we wrap up for final thoughts and say to you, again, I talk about the cultural sensitivities of South Africans who say, as a black South African in Botswana, for instance, I might argue that I want to be buried so that my children know where to look for my remains if they want to speak to the spirit and such. This is just some of the beliefs that many South Africans very well have. And when you make the argument then for a cremation, what does that sound like when you're speaking to a family like that?
Some of the people don't even know what cremation is all about, and those awarenesses and education helps them a lot to understand what is it all about. And from our side as JCPZ, it is all about education and awareness, not enforcing families to take up cremations, but we are encouraging cremations. We still have enough burial plots for the next 30 to 40 years, as I said. And then also there's an option of reopens, options of reduction burials. So all those options are there. So families have choices to make. It's not that for the alternatives, we are forcing them, but we are just encouraging them. Yes, some of the families are very reluctant into cremations. Some of them are accepting, some not. But we are seeing an increase in cremations, which means our marketing campaigns are doing enough to make the public aware of the cremations.
Yeah, just to feed my curiosity as well, there was something that we talked about earlier. Now I'm unable to find the word, but the green burial, right? And I know that this is something more innovative. Explain what that is for us, please.
Yes, the green burials are more like sustainable burials, such as reopens. Anything that is saving the space is considered the green burials. Also, cremation is considered one of the sustainable green burials. Few years ago, we had to revamp both our crematoria facilities so they can be green crematoria. Then we have that licenses of being green crematoria from GDAT. So every 5 years, we renew that license and we are tested every year for air emissions. So also the reburials constitute on our green burial programs.
Okay. Interesting. Well, lots of innovation coming ahead and obviously lots of education to come to us as well. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Mr. Azola Manjati, Head of Cemeteries and Crematoria at Johannesburg City Parks and Zoo.